Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the evolution of influencer marketing and shaping the narrative as a force for social good. I'm Lauren Seegers. I have a talent agency here in Austin. And to my left is Cara Caulkins of Cara Caulkins Communications. She has a lifestyle agency here in Austin as well. She has more than a decade of experience in PR, so she's an expert here. One of her main clients is Bumble, her longest running clients, and really wanted to talk about and focus today about gender equality and how they're doing that. One of the best right now. Rachel Holtin, she's the founder of Austin Foodstagram. She has more than 85,000 followers on Instagram alone. And she's on a few boards and really nonprofits and really elevates her platform to be able to do things and highlight force of good. Doug on the end, he's the digital strategist at Hahn Public Communications, which is the oldest PR agency in the state. He's worked with major clients like Coca-Cola, Mercedes, 3M, but also some smaller clients as well. And really today I want him to talk a lot about kind of those strategies and how it can be used with nonprofits. So we're going to first discuss brands. Doug, are you seeing profit companies use social influencers to push narratives related to the greater good?
I think absolutely. For one, everybody right now is involved in cause marketing in some way, shape, or form, whether that's a for-profit or nonprofit. Nonprofits experience a lot of difficulties that for-profits might not, budget restraints, things along those lines. But everyone is finding some kind of cause to get behind, regardless of if it's a food brand, an automotive brand, a nonprofit brand, a charity. Everyone is doing something for the greater good. So, I mean, absolutely. Every brand that I work with.
How have you seen that messaging change over time with the evolution of influencer marketing and kind of different tactics they're doing?
Yeah, I think people and brands in general are willing to take more risks now associated with the causes that they want to get behind, right? So these large corporations are actually willing to go out on the ledge for things that they believe in, whereas in the past they would stray away from things like that because it would hurt their book of business, things along those lines. Cause marketing, typically, it happens in three phases, really, right? One being the campaign ideation, what's the cause you're going to get behind? Phase two, or step two, as I see it, is really fighting through any kind of negative pushback that you're going to get, right? Any kind of cause has two sides to it, right? There's believers, non-believers, whatever it may be. So there's always going to be naysayers with whatever you might be talking about. So it's important to kind of wade through that and make it out to the other side to really reap the benefits of your cause efforts.
Right. Yeah, well, how have you seen this messaging change over time? Like Bumble, for example, I mean, it's just kind of perfect timing with the Me Too movement, but it's really an authentic message that was kind of before that.
Yeah, I think that's really the key, is the authenticity. So my work with Bumble is primarily related to what we're doing here in the Austin community and helping other community marketing managers around the country sort of take the larger messages that they are doing as a brand and then create communities in our cities to connect people to the brand, to offer perks to Bumble users. But I think overall it's really interesting, what Bumble has done so successfully is almost, yes, the Me Too movement and everyone's kind of doing things related to that, but they're really keeping what their beliefs are and what they're passionate about very authentic to their brand. So yes, it's aligning with what's happening, but they're also doing things that they would be doing probably regardless of what other chatter was going on around. And I think that's a really important thing for brands to consider always when they're trying to think of like what their cause is or what they're going to support, is making sure that it does align with what they're already doing or what they believe in, because if it's not authentic, consumers can see right through that, and then it's a huge backlash.
I agree. And community engagement is really important too. So what kind of social tactics have you seen work well with the brand, specifically in the Austin market through Facebook and events and really spreading awareness?
It's funny, I actually just had a meeting with the team about Facebook events, and they've seen that the largest number of downloads a lot of times are coming from our Facebook events, because which is really interesting because, you know, I'm not using Facebook as much anymore. I tend to utilize other social media platforms probably more. But I still think there's value in that. So I think related to events and when, you know, you're kind of spreading larger messages, sharing articles, Facebook still tends to do really well. I think, you know, with Instagram, and obviously Rachel can talk a bit more about this, but, you know, utilizing partners, having certain campaigns. We recently actually just did a campaign that I worked on with Understated Leather, which is also a local Austin brand, but a national fashion company. And Bumble teamed up with them to create this T-shirt that I'm wearing, and all proceeds benefited a nonprofit organization. So we utilized influencer partners as well as both of the brand's social media channels exclusively to advertise that outside of the events that we were doing here in Austin.
That's awesome. So what kind of impact did you see with that, particularly with the social response?
I mean, I think now that people can utilize so many different components of Instagram with stories and swipe up and all of these features, that we're really seeing a lot of sales to products, people going to websites from Instagram directly. And I think that's really important when you're talking about selling things or getting people outside of the platform to go somewhere else. Instagram stories honestly are more successful for clients of mine than static feed posts sometimes, depending on what the campaign is.
Yeah, definitely. Instagram really is one of the few social platforms where you can get as much analytics from it with swipe up links and all those fun things, just because you can really capture the numbers and who's in that audience and the demographic and really hit and control the target audience you're reaching. Rachel, what have you seen kind of working with Wells Fargo for that initiative and some other smaller nonprofits too that you're on the boards from that utilize social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important, obviously, as we talked about, for brands to be utilizing social media for impact causes, but also influencers are really trying to get behind these causes too, because it's a part of a greater story that they can tell. And so from what I've seen, it is more difficult for nonprofits, as Doug mentioned, because they don't always have the budget, but we're seeing a lot of nonprofits partner up with these bigger for-profit organizations. So Wells Fargo is a great example of this. They partnered with Feeding America this past December around the holidays to raise a bunch of funds for the cause, and they looped in influencers to spread that message. So Wells Fargo, being the greater organization with like the bigger budget, was able to pay and loop in the influencers, and they had an agency behind the campaign. So they worked with us and got that message out. So, you know, they're using Instagram stories, swipe ups, they're using feed posts, and hashtags for the campaign that are share worthy. So trying to get other people that follow these influencers to also join this cause and want to be a part of a greater impact.
Yeah, I want to jump in and add something here. Rachel has something known as like a personal brand, right? We don't really talk much about personal brands, but personal brands are just as real and important as corporate brands or entities that we know as brands. Something that we can do now to partner with specific influencers is align those cause efforts, right? If I know that you are interested in environmental protection, then that makes sense for my brand to partner with you. And it's a way to kind of tie in the authenticity level that you're talking about, to make sure that the brand that is associating themselves with the influencer is aligned in more ways than one.
What kind of tactics could these smaller nonprofits and smaller companies be doing that they could learn from these Fortune 500 companies that you've worked with?
I think it's not necessarily always about money, right? Like, so influencers, they work hard at what they do, right? Like, and some people don't realize that. It's a job. It's a full-time job. Rachel can attest to this. But if you don't have money to give your time, right? So this is something that people don't really often think about. A way to work with influencers isn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be just through digital mediums, right? It can transcend into digital mediums if you work together in the real world, right? So let's go out, let's clean up a roadside, let's invite some influencers to work with us doing that. That'll create UGC, user-generated content, from people that are there, people that are knowing about it, people that are involved. I think that's something that oftentimes gets overseen, and people always just think, oh, influencers, I want an Instagram post, right?
Right.
How can we make that relationship actually a relationship and not necessarily just a transaction?
Yeah, it's definitely more about the content too. Like, I love that you said that, because I got to give advice recently to Amplify ATX, and just kind of sharing with their nonprofits and letting them know that, the content creation for these influencers is a big part of it, and they're happy to align with the cause and help out if you can give them the resource and the opportunity to do a cool event where they're getting to help. Like Habitat for Humanity is a great cause, and they do a lot with big corporations here that have great social influence. And so, inviting them to these events where they can be a part of it, and they can also, maybe there's a photographer there, or there's someone that's creating this content, it makes it super easy for them to share and align, and get that message out.
Content can happen naturally, right? If the cause is good and you're behind it, as an influencer, it's also easy for me to get you involved if you are truly passionate about what I'm passionate about, right, as a brand. So, maybe you can forge some good relationships. That's something that nonprofits and charities have going for them, right, is that authenticity level with their cause marketing, right? If I'm a Fortune 500 company, yeah, I can do great things and get a push behind cause marketing, but it's a lot different if I'm the actual charity, right? I know it's real. There's no fakeness to that.
Habitat for Humanity here locally just had a great example of that with their women's build that's happening over the next few months, and partnering with some larger influencers, as well as obviously like the supporting brands being people like Bumble and Kendra Scott and really like notable companies here, but getting people involved like Genevieve Padalecki, who like had a really interest in this cause regardless, and so now she's able to partner and use her voice to spread that and get people to sign up and show up and be there in person. So it's like transcending all digital, in person, all the things.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm a digital strategist. I want everything online. I want the credit for the work that we put in. But we can't negate the importance of real world difference, being there in person.
Exactly. And I know it's very, very important for these nonprofits to do as much as they can authentically, but if they do have a smaller budget, how can they really learn how to navigate that? Would it be paying for a strategist such as yourself to really jump in? Are there things they can really, what's the takeaway, and how could they do this?
Yeah. So influencer marketing in general has evolved, not just in cause marketing, but there used to be maybe 100 influencers when I started back in 2011, right? I did the voice of Grumpy Cat for a while, which was a lot of fun. But the world has changed since then, right? Now you have, essentially millions of influencers, right? Now we have micro influencers like Rachel, and we have what's considered a nano influencer now, right? Which is literally anybody. So everyone's an influencer in some way, shape, or form, and user-generated content is the most important thing. From an agency standpoint, what has changed is influencers used to get a lot of their work through third-party networks, right? You have, Izeas, CrowdTaps, all these big companies that made a living basically scraping money off the top of influencer campaigns. No longer do you really have to do that. You're seeing a lot of agencies bringing that in-house to save money for the brand and keeping the allegiance to the brand and working more directly with influencers, which is better for everybody. I think that's a big difference. You're also seeing a lot of brands even taking things in-house a ton, right? So agencies being that medium for influencer marketing isn't necessarily the only way to go now, right? If you're a brand or a charity, nonprofit, whatever it may be, you can bring that work in-house, right, and save the 40% that you would be losing using a third-party network.
Yeah. Takes a team for sure. That's why I have Lauren and Cara who helped me for a bit too. But the more personal I think you can be with your campaigns, that really helps. So having people who are in-house and actually know that cause takes away a couple of those extra steps and, some of the money too that would go into it if you're working directly with people. But I think that's why companies are hiring these influencer marketing managers and social media managers to be really close to that subject matter.
And I think it's also from the brand side sometimes about quality versus quantity. So, there are definitely, for some brands, it might make sense, for profit or nonprofit, to partner with many influencers and kind of spread a message, and maybe they're not as, have a large of a following, or to think, reconsider, like if your strategy is better aligned to have a more of a quality content and a campaign that's going to be more lasting, to partner with someone like Rachel over the course of a year or 6 months where you have consistent content and really aligning with a partner that also speaks to your values. I think there's a lot to be said there, and that brands sort of need to figure out what's best for them of what message they're trying to get across.
You develop a friendship, over time, right? Like if Rachel and I work together on one campaign, that'll lead to another one, that leads to this email and this text message. And then it becomes more than just a branded partnership. It's a friendship that is developed over time, right? So you really nurture that, and it pays off on both sides, right? Because the influencer enjoys working with you, and the influencer creates better content for you, right?
They also probably understand your messaging better because they worked on that campaign for a longer time and with that partner. So it's better to have, for me, I would prefer to have like 5 partners throughout the year that I work with a bunch on versus, 50, because I can actually understand what their company's doing, their cause initiatives, and just be more involved overall in that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a really strategic approach versus a lot of big brands. Some do it right, some do it, I would think, not right, and the best they could be doing because the space is so new, but really they care about more, like Cara said, quantity than quality. If you really have a good core group of influencers and you're using them to spread your message, they understand your goals, they understand your initiatives and brands and everything, I think that's the most impactful for most brands, but that might not be the case for everyone. Are there kind of any brands you think that would be better for kind of mass quantities, like the Fortune 500 companies, or?
I mean, I think you can do a lot of good things with quantity. You really can. I recently just did a campaign with Nature Sweet Tomatoes, and we did 60 pieces of content. Right, that's a lot. I've also done campaigns with Whataburger where we've done 8. Right, so I've seen success on both ends. It depends on what you're really trying to drive. What are your business goals? And it really comes back to budget. Everything always does.
Yeah.
So
I think products sometimes too, if it's skincare or maybe a food or, packaged goods, like sometimes quantity is better because you want people to be seeing it in sort of all of these places. So again, it's really about like what you're trying to do for the brand.
Exactly, and that really depends on the type of content it is too, where you're promoting a custom code, and a swipe up link and everything like that, versus that really more authentic content that kind of really meshes well within your feed and shows brand loyalty if you're continuing to do it. I want to change the conversation topic a little bit and talk about the future. How fast is this space growing, influencer marketing specifically?
Well, from a PR standpoint, I mean, influencers are the new, subdivision of media. The media landscape is shrinking. We read about newspapers and magazines folding every day. And so as someone speaking to those types of outlets, on a regular basis on behalf of clients, like we now consider social media another media tool for our brands. And so I think that that's not going to change. It's only going to increase from here. So figuring out how to navigate that from a brand standpoint and what you're offering and how you're telling the story. And it might be a little different how you're telling the story to influencers or through social media than how you're telling it to the New York Times or, to Self Magazine.
Yeah, it's changed incredibly fast. It's super interesting from an influencer standpoint. I mean, you think about like the type of marketing that we do is it's kind of word of mouth, even though we don't know all of our followers. We're still sharing a very personal message of our experience with a brand to a bunch of people. And that's something that's happened for years and years, and it's always been a way of marketing. The best way is to get your product in the hands of people and to get people talking about that product. So now it's just the medium that's, kind of changing. And so with social media, we don't know what the next big thing might be. Right now, Instagram is obviously a very large one, but that could change. But I do think, to Cara's point, like this type of word of mouth marketing through influencers, through people we look up to, will be around for a long time. So.
Yeah, I think we already touched on a couple of the big evolutions, right? Just the sheer number of influencers for one. 2 being the digression from third-party networks. 3, I think, which is kind of more on the forefront and taking place now, are the tools that are accessible to agencies and brands alike for influencer identification, campaign management, things along those lines. We used to select influencers based on them, the influencer, right? I see Rachel. I think Rachel is a good fit for my brand just based on her persona. However, now what we have at our disposal are tools that can really access audience data, right? So the influencer at the end of the day is a means to an end, right? They are a vehicle for me to distribute my message. And that message I want to get to the proper audience, not necessarily just because it's from that person. So now I can dissect Rachel's audience and I can tell, okay, her audience is 70% female, age 24 to 35, that lives in Austin, Texas, and cares about water conservation, right?
Wow, that was pretty spot on. Minus the water conservation, I'm not really sure.
I pulled
about
that one.
part,
I pulled that one out. The funny thing is, I didn't actually look at the audience data for you, but I made some assumptions. No, but it's really important, right? Because I mean, yes, at the end of the day, the influencer, they are essentially a spokesperson for your brand. However, are they reaching the people that you want? Right, that's the most important thing as a marketer that we need to pay attention to. So there's tools out there, just a couple off the top of my head. You've got Julius, Hyper, Maverick. There's a ton of great tools that I think marketers have at their disposal now that they didn't have probably even 12 months ago.
Right. Well, what could brands be doing differently? I know there's a lot of misconceptions where brands are looking at just the follower size and not looking who's in that follower. We've got a Kim Kardashian who has multiple millions of followers, but who's in that audience really? It does depend on the type of brand, but when you're really hyper targeting a brand, like how could brands be doing this better?
It depends greatly by platform, right? If you're looking at what engagements do you want to look at, you also need to understand the type of influencer, right? If you're talking about a Kim Kardashian, that's not necessarily a digital influencer, that's what we consider a celebrity influencer. You typically utilize a celebrity influencer for reach alone, really. Versus a micro influencer, I'd look much closer to engagement rate and things of those sorts. However, success metrics and what they are, where you set that benchmark, is going to vary greatly by platform, right? You're going to see really high engagement rates on Instagram versus like Twitter, where you'll probably see 1 to 3%.
What more could nonprofits be doing in a different capacity? Just in general, influencer marketing.
Nonprofits specifically, I think, is just get involved in the influencer space, right? It's kind of, I think nonprofits, at least that I've worked with in the past, have always been fearful. It's kind of like a second thought. It's always the answer is, oh, I would love to do influencer marketing, but I don't have the money, or I can't get the approvals to do that. Just fight for it, right? Because it's important. It's not as expensive as you think, and it's a way to build upon the authenticity that you've already built as a nonprofit brand with, and we kind of touched on this, but with people that align with your message and your cause.
Right.
It's just natural.
Yeah.
And I think strategic partners too I mentioned that earlier, but that's a huge part of it. Like finding other bigger brands that also support your cause and working with them on the messaging and getting that out.
Yeah, partnerships are super important, right? So if we're talking about cause marketing, the cause comes before the marketing, right? It's all about the cause. So if I'm Patagonia, I'm not going to not partner with REI because they're a competitor. I'm going to partner with them because we believe in conserving our national parks or getting people out to vote or something like that. And in turn, us doing something like that together is going to lift both of us, right? You're going to see more price increase tolerance, larger share of wallet for both of you, from other competitors. There's more to be gained through, I guess we'll call them competitive partnerships, than there is to lose, really, in cause marketing.
I think also we talked a little bit, you mentioned brands being a little more risky in what they're willing to do now. I think that's very true, and gets more...
Doesn't always work.
Doesn't always work, but when it does, you get a lot of buzz and good PR, media attention around it. I think there is also something to be said maybe for nonprofits being creative in like the message they're delivering or how they're delivering it, because there's an opportunity for them to sort of get PR on their own campaign as well if they have something really interesting to say.
Cara, where do you see influencer marketing now versus in 3 years? As you're a PR expert, really, how are you adding that onto your overall strategy?
Well, again, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, we have to think of it as another avenue of media. And so being able to put that into our strategies with clients from the get-go, like this has to be a part of your plan, or, you're not going to see the success that we know you want to see. So I think educating brands and clients on that is super important right now. And then obviously as it continues to grow, I think it will be more commonplace for PR strategies overall.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I did influencer marketing for Favor Delivery, and I came onto their team as the first person over social media and influencers. And so it was a really new time to this. It was 3 years ago, and when you think about how quickly this industry has changed, not a lot of people were doing influencer marketing yet, so we were really early to it, and it was very authentic. But it was a great way to kind of learn and grow with the company, and now it's like everyone kind of needs this. So yeah, so we were great, but we had a lot of like early traction with it, and they're still, they still have a dedicated person, or maybe even two now for that role, because it's so important.
I think we're going to start to see digital influencers and micro influencers start to transcend their digital realms that they live in, right? You're going to start to see them featured in commercials and things along those lines, because there is an existing celebrity status to them that most of us probably don't realize. Some of the micro influencers with larger followings, though, you're looking at 200,000 to 500,000 followers. That's pretty substantial, right? And if your audience is that niche and your brand aligns with it that perfectly, why would you not use that celebrity status that exists online in your other marketing mediums, right? So I don't think we're too far away from seeing Rachel in a Juiceland commercial.
Yeah, cool. Bad idea.
I had Juiceland this morning, and like 3 to 4 times a week, usually on average.
Juiceland is listening. Contact Lauren Seegers.
Well, Rachel, on the influencer side, I know you've worked on building strategies, influencer strategies really early in the game. What have you seen change since then? You started in 2014. What kind of things, because a lot of brands are still, hey, I'll give you a free ticket to this event if you do this, this, and this, whenever a post is valued at $1,000 more, and they don't understand how much this actually costs. Education is so important, but really, are you seeing that evolve at all?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more money in the game now because, people have realized this is a marketing channel more so. When we were doing it for Favor in the early days, a lot of these huge influencers like myself, and including myself at the time, weren't monetizing our audience very much. We were just kind of excited to accept a free meal or this or that. And so it's definitely grown where like we've come to see like the value in what we're providing, and, put together more strategic packages of this is what you'll get out of paying for an influencer post, for a story. This is how many people you'll reach. This is how engaged they are. This is how many click-throughs on average we see. It was a lot, like in the early days too, though, it was a lot more authentic. No one knew this was happening. So I feel like the promo codes actually worked better sometimes in the early days because people didn't know they were being sold to. Now we have a little more resistance of like people on social media are like, oh yeah, well that influencer's just trying to sell me that thing. Not saying it doesn't still work. It definitely does. But you have to be more creative with your messaging and actually, make sure people know that this is still authentic. I'm still working with this brand because I believe in what they're doing, and being really smart about that.
Tying it back to, we talked a lot about budget restraints and things like that, and you make a good point that at one point in time, coupons were enough to get you to post something. It's not really like that anymore for micro-influencers, but there's a kind of influencer that we haven't really touched on, and that's what we consider like brand advocates, right? People that are naturally in conversation regularly with your brand, your nonprofit, your charity, to tie it back to what we're talking about here. Those are the people that might be more inclined to do something for you. If they really like your cause, send them a T-shirt. Maybe they'll create a piece of content for you just in the T-shirt. There are people out there that still exist that are willing to work, for non-monetary compensation.
Messing up the market for us.
Well, it
depends on what it is.
It's much
Totally.
different too, because these brand advocates, these nano influencers, essentially, the value that they bring are not the caliber of content or reach or engagement that someone like Rachel or an established influencer is going to bring. So don't get me wrong, a brand advocate is typically not going to replace an influencer, but if you can have a brand advocacy program running alongside an influencer program, that's great. That's what you really want. That's what you see a lot of the larger brands doing. larger brands and corporations even have like opt-in influencer programs, right? If I'm a big fan of a brand, I can go on their website and opt in to being an influencer for them, right? I'm not getting paid, but they're probably sending me product or something
Or like
along those
affiliate.
lines.
Affiliate. I was
Yeah.
gonna say affiliate codes are kind of
Yes.
what we've been seeing a lot happening, and that's another way for brands who might have budget restrictions to maybe pay a little bit less up front, but offer an affiliate code, so then the people that are, writing blog posts or Instagram posts and using codes are actually getting a percentage of revenue back. We're actually also seeing that with media, so even sites like CNN and BuzzFeed are using brand affiliate codes and are actually having that be a revenue driver for them when people are buying product from codes that they're using in editorial and in advertorial, which is interesting.
So one of the final things I wanted to talk about, what brands are doing this right, are pushing for the social good and really successful about it?
I mean, I think Bumble's a great example. I don't work on all of their campaigns in that regards, but just as a consumer viewing them, I think they're doing a really great job in the space, being both authentic to their brand, having lasting partnerships with a cause that's important, and delivering that message in the right way. So that's kind of what I think about when I look at what people are doing, sort of those three check marks. One thing that I've really loved seeing recently was even a big brand like Nike, that really cool commercial, very like go girl power that they recently put out. I thought that was fantastic. They seem to always be doing really innovative things. I don't know, have you guys seen?
I love that you brought up Nike. Earlier I mentioned, right, there's like 3 steps to cause marketing: campaign ideation, coming up with the idea, committing to it, and sticking with it through all the negative backlash that you're going to receive from the naysayers, and then reaping the positive benefits afterwards. And Nike is a prime example of someone that did that just amazingly well. I mean, how many weeks ago was it where people were burning Nikes because of the Colin Kaepernick campaign, right? And now they stuck with it, and then a week later, sales were through the roof, right? They lost people that weren't true fans of the brand and are probably people that they don't want to associate with as a brand anyway. And then they followed up with that amazing Serena Williams commercial.
Yes.
Unreal. Yeah,
Super Bowl,
unreal, right?
Bumble
They
commercial.
they are fully committed.
Oh, another one.
Yes, yeah. All over the place.
Just killing
It's a
it.
great face
But
for
they are fully committed, right? They are in it now. There's no turning back, right? And they're going with it, and it's working. I think that's an awesome example. A couple other ones that I don't need to go specifically into the campaigns they're doing, but do really good work for good. Lyft does awesome stuff for jobs for immigrants, right? Driving jobs. A lot of their drivers are immigrants, and they provide great work for them. Airbnb does awesome stuff to boost economies in lower income areas and things like that. We mentioned Patagonia and all of those outdoor companies, right? North Face, REI, all of them are doing amazing things for in the environment and preservation, things along those lines. Those are a little easier causes to get behind. No one's going to be like, oh, I hate the environment. I don't know. So yes, of course we want to preserve national parks, right? Yeah. So that's a little easier to get people to back you on than, right, something like civil liberties like Nike and really, really taking a risk. That's a huge risk that we were talking about. But those are just a handful of brands that I think are killing it out there.
Yeah, I was going to say Bumble and Patagonia as well, but I think in the food sustainability space, Imperfect Produce is one that's caught my attention recently. I love what they're doing. Just kind of, trying to create a better way to get food on the table for people and also eliminate the problem of food waste. So.
Yeah, really good point. And I think everyone's familiar with that. I know about it through Instagram. Yeah. And so it shows the power of one platform that you can be utilizing. Flipping it over, what about nonprofits? Have you seen any do it right that other nonprofits can really look to and find inspiration for?
Nonprofit for me, I work on Beef Loving Texans. It's the consumer arm of the Texas Beef Council, which is actually a nonprofit, believe it or not, with the main mission to sell beef, right? It doesn't matter what brand, doesn't matter what farm it's coming from. We just want to sell beef product. it's a nonprofit. They pay into ranchers and things like that. But we do influencer marketing through recipes, right? It's a great way to tie in direct sale. So we partner with influencers to create original recipes with beef products, share it out through their channels, and ultimately, if someone wants to create that recipe, you have to go buy beef, right? So that's, I think, a good example of a nonprofit that I work with closely that's going to be doing some good things in the influencer space in the near future.
What would you say that are the key recommendations for nonprofit and for-profit companies as well that might be on the smaller end with budget restrictions as well? What are the key takeaways from this?
I think it would definitely be not to be afraid to approach influencers. There is a space for your brand. Strategic partnerships are a big part of that. So if you maybe don't feel like you have the budget, maybe looping in someone else who already is connected or working with those influencers in that space, and or just sending them some sort of product or creating a really fun event that they can attend, and just, you know, inviting them, getting the word out. There is a ton of opportunity out there, and there's a ton of influencers too, which is kind of a positive for everybody. Whether you're going after the micro or nano, there's a space for it. So just, you know, don't be afraid to approach people.
I think with that, obviously relationship is key in both PR, how we talk to media, how we talk to influencers. I think social listening is really important for brands, and everyone can do that internally or with an agency, because again, you might find people that are speaking about your brand or your cause that are already fans of it, and that's obviously an easier reach then to be able to work with someone if you have a limited budget.
I think nonprofits and charities actually have, and I kind of talked about this a little bit before, something going for you that going for them that a brand does not, right? There's potentially positive PR for the influencer in being associated with your charity or nonprofit, right? So you do have something to offer, right? It doesn't have to be money. You're offering positive PR in return for a partnership. And if your belief in whatever cause it may be does align, then it's a lot easier to forge that relationship and get that campaign going than it would be for me if I was a CPG brand, right? Because then, I mean, yeah, I got to pay, of course. You know, I don't offer the positive PR that I would if I was a charity or a charitable brand.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult when you have Oreo coming to you saying, I can pay you $200, $1,000 less for a post than you would typically charge. And really those brands I've seen that they kind of are like, take it or leave it. It's our reputation if you want us or not, and really undercharging influencers. But we have, and Oreo was not they don't do that, but example of a large company. But it's just something I've seen a little bit more. People are more educated, but what more could these brands be doing to educate themselves? Because I've found a lot of times that I'm working with an agency and they don't really educate their clients well on what it is and the impact and how much. And when I worked at a PR agency, a lot of the times my clients would get just as excited seeing an influencer post that they paid for versus a huge top tier media coverage.
I think that goes back to making sure it's part of a strategy with a brand, you know.
Right.
So maybe that's the PR agencies need to be better about that versus the brands. I mean, if they're educating their clients, I mean, I think as small brands that are just starting and, you know, solo entrepreneurs and founders, you have to realize that this is an important place that you need to be as you're launching something or starting a business or a cause or an event, and really taking the time and making sure that is part of your launch or your new business plans or your ongoing strategy to be listening and engaging with people. I mean, it's not going anywhere. So
yeah, education is really important, right? So as marketers, we understand influencer marketing, right? But someone on the client side, on the brand side, might not be as privy to the information and knowledge that we are. We live it and breathe it every day. So if this is their first go at an influencer campaign, there's a level of education that's required, right? So if you're pitching the concept of influencers, that pitch should probably, half of the pitch should be devoted to an educational element, right? So don't pitch just yet, right? Take the first 30 minutes of that pitch meeting, go through education of what an influencer is, how this campaign could work, and then go into what the actual campaign is, right? So I think education is important. The nuances of influencers aren't as obvious as they may seem.
Yeah, as involved as we are as marketers and people in this space, obviously we understand, but there is a huge learning curve of like, because the space evolves so quickly, like what is this? Why are we doing this as a brand? Why are we putting, so much money in this one bucket of influencer and explaining to them, what the impact has been and what they've seen, and using data and social listening to like kind of show like there's more of an impact out there. And when we work with these people, we're having more sales, and even if it's not a direct correlation, kind of showing like this is what we've seen. The conversation on social media is getting larger. We're reaching more people through this medium.
I agree. It's a really great point. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions we can answer in the audience?
Yes.
Okay, so this is from an influencer's perspective, but I think determining your worth in your 20s is the hardest thing of life, regardless if you work for a company or you work for yourself. So how would you recommend navigating that when you are approaching brands and you're not trying to align yourself with 50 brands, like you said, just because you're making a buck? You really want to align with brands that you want to form a relationship with. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be a paid per post type of thing. It should be, give me 6 months to organically produce content for you and let's form a relationship. Like, how do you determine a dollar value to that?
I feel like Lauren should answer this.
Really, just looking at other aspects of the brand. How well is it a match to you? Comparing the market. What does it cost to put a billboard up? Really differentiating yourself first. Your pitch should be very custom. This is who I am. This is why it's a fit to your brand, and this is what we can do together. A lot of the times, these people don't have 3 minutes to even read through your whole email. Making sure your pitch is very, very strong, similar to what I did when I pitched media. Just really get a hook on the get-go. There's so many influencers that they could be reaching out to, but you really have to differentiate yourself. Reach out to the appropriate contacts. Send LinkedIn messages, different things, different avenues. Tweet at them, whatever it is. Follow them. Hey, I saw you did this. I have an idea. Let's do this together. Don't give it away too soon because they could take your idea and run. Unfortunately, that's happened a few times with me before. But really giving them that tease and that hook to really want to work with you and show you, I'm not just going to hold your product and take a picture with it. I'm going to think about, are there any current events going on in Austin? Can I take this product down to Blues on the Green and do a lifestyle shot versus standing somewhere random and holding the product? So I think the quality of work, you can give them past examples of what you do. Really, your feed is your portfolio too. When they're looking at your page, making sure all of your content is what you would want a brand to see potentially while they're reviewing you. So there's a lot of different factors in it. And unfortunately, I found there's not many talent agents in the state of Texas. They're really based in New York and LA and London. And that's one of the reasons I started this, not because it's just exciting, but I found that all these influencers that have under 600,000 followers don't have representation and don't really kind of
know what to charge.
They don't know what to charge. They don't know their value. So unfortunately, that's kind of, you really have to do the research yourself. Ask someone at a PR agency, hey, can I pick your brain for 10 minutes because of these 3 things I want to ask you? Don't just say, can I have your time for 15 minutes? Make sure that you're getting in front of the right people. Maintain those relationships. They might have something down the line if they don't have something for you immediately. So I know that was a lot, but there's a lot of factors that go into it.
And for the how much to charge, obviously, yeah, asking, kind of around, kind of looking and maybe at other people that are, and maybe asking them for advice. Thinking about how much time you're putting into. I mean, when I first started figuring out how to charge PR clients, it was, okay, well, what's my hourly rate? And like, how many hours am I going to dedicate to this project? And that can kind of help you also, at least initially, set some financial parameters.
I think patience is important too. I get a few emails a day from different influencers, right, saying, oh, can I partner with this brand that I see you work with? I might not have a campaign going at that moment in time, right? So just be patient. I do log all of those influencers, right? And I revisit them at a later date when I might have an opportunity. So I think Lauren mentioned it, but follow up later down the line. See if there's anything going on at the time, if there's anything in the near future, or if there's interest in general.